Thank you for that kind introduction. When Prince Salim succeeded his father, the great Emperor Akbar, and became the fourth Mughal emperor in 1605, he chose the title Jahangir. He wrote in his memoirs, in Persian, in his memoirs, entitled the Jahangir-Nameh, which have been translated in 2 English versions, but I'm using the translation by Wheeler Thaxton. He wrote, "It occurred to me that I should change my name, lest it be confused with the Caesars of Anatolia. An inspiration from the beyond suggested to me that the labor of emperors is world domination, Jahangiri. So I named myself Jahangir and made my honorific Nuruddin, light of religion, because my accession occurred at the time of the rising of the majestic greater luminary, at a time when the world was being illuminated." Many of his commissions from the very beginning of his reign and throughout it were given names that also included the word Nur, light. So he installed pavilions, for instance, in a famous beauty spot called Nur Cheshme, or which he sometimes called Cheshme Nur. Some of the first gold coins to be struck in his reign bore a verse proclaiming the world became illuminated by this coin like the sun, and they were given names like Nur Shahi, light of the king, Nur Sultani, Nur Jahani. And so from all of this, it's clear that with his accession, a dazzling new age was being proclaimed. And his artistic commissions expressed very traditional concepts of royalty, but in new ways. And in this regard, the theme of light is very, very important. In paintings like this one, portraits show him with a halo, and this is an innovation. And sometimes they're very discreetly rendered, sometimes, as we'll see, they're very, very extravagant. But the golden circle, or disc of light, would become a standard motif in portraits of future emperors to indicate their royalty. So we have here Shah Jahan gliding through a landscape with a very delicately rendered halo of light encircling his head, and it would be adopted by subsequent rulers regardless of religious affiliation. So it became just a standard convention of royalty, and we have here Ranjit Singh, who was the Sikh ruler of the Punjab in the 19th century, in a painting very obviously borrowing from the conventions of Shah Jahan's reign. Now, I don't want to suggest at all, it goes without saying, that the halo was not in itself a new feature in Indian art. It's a fundamental feature in Buddhist sculpture and painting, borrowed from Sasani in Iran, and it's also a constant feature of Hindu and Jain art. But what I'd like to focus on here is the sudden appearance in Jahangir's reign of forms that were derived very specifically from Christian art. And it's most conspicuous in painting where the Christian source, as well as in the field of painting rather, where the Christian source as well as the artistic innovation have very often been noted. But what seems to me very intriguing is that we know very well that the arrival of Christian art in the Mughal Empire began from the 1580s. But why suddenly, in the reign of Jahangir, was a Christian motif borrowed to express royalty in imperial portraits? Now, the halo in Mughal art is the visual expression of a fundamental concept of Iranian kingship, which was followed by these Muslim rulers of a culturally very hybrid empire in which, of course, Hindus were a majority. Persian was the official language of the state, and it was the cultural language of the elite of the court. And the concept of royalty is described in the late 16th century by the scholar whom Akbar had commissioned to write the official history of the reign. It was called the Akbar-Nameh, and it incorporated a compendious third volume entitled the Aini Akbari, or Institutes of Akbar, which surveys the institutions of the royal household and opens with a long passage on the nature of royalty itself. And in a very famous and often quoted passage, the author states, Royalty is a light emanating from God and a ray from the sun, the illuminator of the universe. Modern language calls this light Fare Izadi, divine glory. It's communicated by God to kings without the intermediate assistance of anyone, and men in the presence of it bend the forehead of praise towards the ground of submission. And those imbued with divine glory, he says, were benevolent and just towards their subjects. They were courageous, they were curious, they were profoundly devout. And Abulullah Sudavar has provided a succinct account of this Iranian concept and its very long history. He traces it from Zoroastrian and Pahlavi texts through Persian literature, including Abul Fazl's commentary. And he, I think, is the first to make this explicit link between the halo in Mughal painting and the concept of divine glory, but he doesn't go into detail because the focus of his attention is the literature. So I thought it might be interesting to examine this concept of divine glory in the art of Jahangir's court. And in this picture, you can see Jahangir holding an orb, which is actually the world. You may be able to make out the continents, and obviously this is an allusion to his title, Jahangir, Caesar, someone who seizes the world. It's beyond doubt, as many have observed, this isn't by any means a new observation, that Christian art was the catalyst for the appearance in Mughal painting of halos of various forms. But until the reign of Jahangir, halos were associated with copies of Christian imagery or adaptations of Christian subjects. So what's new is this association with Jahangir, the imperial figure, and the halo. It's been suggested that European art arrived at the Mughal court even before 1580, which was when the first Jesuit mission travelled from Portuguese Goa to Akbar's new capital of Fatehpur Sikri, because Akbar wanted to involve those knowledgeable in the Christian faith in the nighttime debates that were being held at court on religion. The Jesuit fathers who arrived in 1580 and those who followed in two further missions during his reign definitely brought Christian images, and there is copious documentation for this. The exotic art that the first mission brought caused an absolute sensation. Crowds flocked to the chapel to see the pictures that were put out on show. The Christian images were avidly studied by Akbar, who brought the ladies of the court to see them, by Jahangir while he was still a prince later on in the further missions, and the paintings, prints and illustrated books were eagerly received over the next 20 years as gifts, and they were copied or adapted by the court artists. There was a constant renewing of the supply of Christian imagery with the successive embassies, the missions. And the third mission had a professional painter from Portugal in the entourage. And this mission was still in the subcontinent when Jahangir became emperor. And all of this, from time to time, included works sent from Goa or directly from Rome. So there's a continuing renewal of influences. Now, as I mentioned, the nimbus in association with the emperor seems to be absolutely an innovation of Jahangir's reign. I found no contemporary portraits of Akbar with a halo. Nevertheless, Akbar's royalty is always apparent. It's alluded to in pictures by his artists in a number of different ways. And his scholar-author Abul Fazl helpfully provides a list of some of the emblems of royalty at court. The throne was the preeminent form, and so it's not surprising that in the official illustrated copy of the text of the Akbarnama, preserved a partial copy is in the V&A from where this picture comes, there are depictions of thrones, of Akbar on a throne, and here we see him receiving the Iranian ambassador. And it may be, I don't know if this is fanciful, but it may be that the positioning of Akbar's head at exactly the center of this golden halo-like back of the throne is also intended to suggest the divine glory, but his head is not always positioned like this. But in most of these paintings, including the Akbarnama pages, there's an intensification of the use of gold around the royal figure, which is very apparent. But his status is indicated mostly by the fact that he's sitting on a throne, or by other conventions, the ornaments he wears, notably the turban plume, which at this time was a royal prerogative, or by other emblems which are also in Abul Fazl's list, like the sun shield, the Aftag gear, which follows the emperor, or by these collections of weapons held by bearers wrapped in red cloth, the colour of royalty. Now, when Jahangir became emperor, all these and other traditional metaphors and emblems continued, but allusions to light, as I mentioned, become strikingly prominent. One of Jahangir's first tasks as emperor, as with any new ruler, was to order new coins to be struck, and I've mentioned that they were given these names associating them with light. And on the heaviest coins, there was a verse composed by Jahangir's future brother-in-law, Asif Khan,